I set out to ride a 100-mile bike race as someone living with type 1 diabetes, and it did not go according to plan. Now, in today's episode, I am going to break down the exact science behind how you can manage blood sugars and how I did during ultra endurance athletics, just in case you're into that kind of stuff. But even if you're not, I guarantee you're going to learn something new today, because I did during that race that forced me to adapt and pivot with a completely different strategy that I never saw coming. Now, this story is pretty intense, so it's either going to inspire you or terrify you, depending on the kind of person that you are. But I hope truly that it does do a little bit of both, because type 1 diabetes can be very, very dangerous if you do not go into these things with a proper plan. But with a plan, you can complete just about anything the same as a non-diabetic would. So, if you don't know who I am, my name is Matt Vandevecht. I am a certified master fitness trainer and nutritionist. I live with type 1 diabetes. I'm also a best-selling author of a type 1 diabetes book, and as you probably figured out, an ultra endurance enthusiast. So today we're going to break down the strategies, the stories, the pitfalls, and the lessons learned. Truly hope you enjoy it. So let's just dive into it, and I'll break it all down. Now, right out of the gates, I got to tell you, there was a race that I was supposed to do that I did not do. And this is going to sound confusing, but let me break it down for you. So there's a Gran Fondo that I registered for months ago after I finished my Ironman race. I was like, hey, while I'm in this crazy good shape doing Ironman stuff, I might as well just do a 100-mile race, because that's no biggie, right? Which, the fact that that's a no biggie for me right now is insane to even consider. It's not normal. Okay, I want to just lead with that. I recognize it is not normal. But for me, a 100-mile bike ride is like, oh yeah, that's not too bad, right? Like, that's just another day working out. And not to say it's not difficult, but that's just kind of the expectations that I've set for myself in this phase of life. But I thought, I'll just do that race. And the race came, and the day before registration, so 2 days before the actual race, my wife and I took our daughter out. She's 3, and she was like, I want to go on a hike. And I was like, let's just go out to the course. And I want to drive the course, because I like to get familiar with these things before I actually have to race it, so I can know what to expect, right? As we're driving, realize that this course is not set up for safety. It was clearly picked for the beauty. The scenery was amazing, but the roads, I found out, would not be closed to traffic. In fact, there were only a few signs laid out that said, watch out for bikes. And that's it. It was a 1-lane, or technically 2-lane highway. And there's no shoulder, so there's no space for the bikes to ride. So you're biking on the road of a highway out in the mountains with little to no visibility around corners. So I had some time to think about it. I asked the race director, I said, are there cones? Are there anything? Like, are you going to protect us? And they were like, oh, rules of the road. That's just, as if you were cycling on a normal day. We can't close those roads down. It's like, oh, then I'm not going. So ultimately, and this is really hard for me to do, but when I say I'm going to do something, I do it. Right? But recognizing that I've got a 3-year-old at home, I've got a wife, I have people who love me outside of that. I got you guys I got to talk to every week, right? That I get to talk to. I love hanging out with you guys. But I was like, you know what? It's just not worth the risk. I realize it's probably going to be fine, but I can't put my family in a position where I might not make it back from a race that just isn't that important to me. Like Ironman, when I did my Ironman, I was set on that goal. I was going to do it, and there were a number of dangerous challenges that were questionable for me to complete. But I completed it, checked it off my list. It was a bucket list thing, right? With this ride, not that important. So I was like, I'll just go do 100 miles on my own. I don't care. It's cool to get the medal, right? But I don't really care. And so made the decision to not do the race. And I decided to pivot and do my own 100 miles. I mapped out the route to be very similar. So similar elevation gains, similar distances, similar area, but on a course that I knew had bike lanes and would be safe and that I've done before. So I was familiar with it. And I realized as I was thinking through, this is kind of what we as renegade warriors, right? You guys see it on my shirt. We think differently, where I was like, okay, the course isn't safe, but I still want to do the race. I've been training for it, so I'm going to do it. We had to pivot. with our medical teams, a lot of times, unfortunately, it's not safe. Just like the race wasn't safe, our medical teams, the ones we're supposed to trust, not always. There are some excellent doctors and endos and dietitians out there, but from the thousands of type 1s that I've talked to over the years, the bulk of our medical teams are either just not helpful or giving bad advice. And I was given bad advice on diagnosis day when I was first diagnosed with type 1. They told me, you can never have carbs ever again. You're gonna die in 10 years. And I was 19. So like, you're gonna die before you're 30. And you're gonna die of complications. Like you're gonna lose limbs on the way out. So good luck, kid. I was like, what? And that was my doctor told me that. So I'm realizing now there's these parallels, right? Where I was like, that race isn't safe. I'm deeming it unsafe. I'm going to go do my own thing. And that's literally what I did with my medical team and what so many of you are doing as well. And I respect that. I think it's important to know that you need to be your own best advocate. And if you're not getting what you need to go elsewhere, right? So for me, recognizing that even within our medical teams, sometimes it's important to pivot. Like, okay, this isn't working. It's time to try something new, right? It's time to find something that's in alignment with what I want as an outcome. So that was the first step. The race that never happened. I was like, I'm going to go do my own. But the challenge with doing your own race and with going at it alone with diabetes is that there's no support, right? And I was talking to the race director about this actually the day before the race. And I was like, I think I'm just going to do my own thing. Can I change my registration? And they're like, it's too late. I was like, okay, well, I'm coming back for the medal because I paid for that. And I'm still doing the whole race, just not your race, which is kind of funny because the medal is behind me. I did, in fact, go back after completing my own 100 miles. I was like, I'm ready. Give me my medal. I need recognition for this. Silly. Anyways. But recognizing that going solo, they had warned me, they were like, you're unsupported, just so you know, like our course may be dangerous, but you have mechanical support, you have medical support, you have aid stations with food and water. Just like if you go out by yourself, you are completely self-supported. I was like, renegade warrior here. I've been self-supporting myself for the last decade plus. I know what it's like to go solo on these things. I joke, but that's kind of how it is with diabetes, right? When your medical team can't catch up to where you want to go. For those of us who refuse to settle for good enough and want to actually thrive with type 1 diabetes, you kind of have to step outside of the norm and do it yourself. It's an unfortunate truth we live with. But I was like, all right, I'm going to do my own thing. And they're like, we don't advise this. And I was like, of course not, because you want me to be in your race, right? But I chose to do it myself, which did mean self-supported. I had to carry all my water. I had to carry all my own food. I had to carry all my own mechanical options, flat tire fixes and multi-tools and all this stuff. So it was a challenge, right? There are no bathrooms. So I had to figure out where the rest stops were that I could use bathrooms and make my own route. I was responsible for everything, but I kind of prefer it like that. And I get the feeling that you might like that too, if you're watching these videos of mine, where you prefer to take responsibility for yourself because you realize that if you take responsibility for yourself, you also take responsibility for your outcomes, which means you can actually achieve better things than the status quo, right? Now, that being said, the first lesson that I learned that ties into diabetes was that we have to pivot sometimes. If things aren't working, it's time to try something new. Right. I think it's what the definition of insanity is. You keep trying the same things, expecting different results. There are so many people out there, not like us, but other people who will repeatedly try the same stuff. I'm just trying to lower my A1C, so I'm going to eat less carbs. It's still not working, so I'm going to eat less carbs. It's still not working. My A1C is still stuck. I'm going to eat less carbs. And I'm like, if it's not working, try something new, right? Come on. But sometimes it is hard to zoom out and see that what you're doing has been repeated for the last year, 5 years, 10 years, decades, right? But if what you're doing isn't working, it's time to try something new. And you get to decide. No one else gets to decide when it's time to pivot, right? And pivoting is you doing what's best for you. For me, I said no to the race. I'm going to do what's best for me because I didn't believe that race was safe. With my medical team, I switched gears, right? No pun intended, but switching gears on a bike, love that. I had to switch gears with my medical team, right? What they were doing wasn't working. Your A1C is below a 7. Keep doing what you're doing. I'm like, barely? I want to be at like a non-diabetic A1C. I want to have freedom. And then when I went to my medical team with like, I go high and low like almost every day, they're like, oh, that's just how diabetes is. Ooh. See, their standards just don't match up to what we have, right? Same with the race director, right? They were like, oh, the roads, yeah, there's no bike lane, but like it should be fine. Just watch out for cars. I'm like, your safety standards just aren't where mine are at. You know, like I'm trying to not dodge cars. I want to ride and enjoy a peaceful bike ride, you know, without fearing for my life. So if your standards are higher than those who are kind of directing your life, it might be time to make your own standards and pivot, right? But lesson number 2 is with diabetes and with this bike race that I did solo, you gotta adapt because things are not going to go according to plan. So not only did the race course not follow or meet my needs, my standards, so I had to pivot and change, but also the day of the race, being that it was self-supported, there were a number of challenges that I could not avoid. And some of them were diabetes related, some of them were event related. But I'll give you a couple examples. Had some sight and CGM issues the night before. You know, those are always fun to have. Throughout the night, I was getting some false, we call them pressure lows with your CGMs. And just by happenstance, I'm wearing 2 CGMs right now. So I've got G7 on this arm, and I've got the G6 on this arm. So both Dexcoms. And I like to have 2 numbers if I can. I happened to have both sensors at this time. Funny enough, this one was expired when I put it on, and now I see why it was expired. Because it didn't work great. Shocker, right? I mean, anyways. With my readings, it was given pressure lows. If you're familiar with those, it's when you lay on top of your sensor, it pushes the wire through your interstitial fluid, it reads your blood sugar as low, and wakes you up when you're not actually low. Had a couple of those. Because it did that, my insulin was suspended because I use the tandem T-Slim pump with Control IQ during the night. I actually turn Control IQ off completely during the day, always, and especially when I do endurance activities and exercise, but that's a story for a different episode. Feel free to ask any questions you have. I'll get to them when I can. But being that it was in sleep mode, it stopped my insulin whenever the CGMs would read as low, even though I wasn't low. So it led to my blood sugars being higher and it having to give extra insulin. And therefore I woke up from my 100-mile race with insulin on board. Oh joy. It's like, I hate that so much because it throws a wrench into the plans, right? My calculations are off now. And so because I had insulin on board, had to recalculate. If you're unfamiliar with that, like why am I talking about calculations? I use blood sugar formulas, and with that, literally calculations of how many carbs do I have to eat per hour? What are my insulin adjustments during the bike ride and after because of insulin sensitivity increases, right? What's my glucose burn rate? How many grams of glucose do I have to balance per 30 minutes of activity? So as you get into the crazier ultra endurance distances, you have to be dialed in. You have to have precision with these things with type 1 diabetes because you're playing with fire, like gasoline on fire. It can go so wrong so fast. So I have to be like basically perfect, right? So I get the insulin on board on my screen. I'm like, gosh dang it, I have to redo everything. But it's fine because blood sugar formulas work. And the whole point of blood sugar formulas is to be able to adapt to life because life isn't fair. Life isn't consistent. Life is rarely predictable. So we have to be able to do that on our own with our blood sugar formulas. In fact, I pulled this from chapter 7, I believe. No, chapter 5. Of the blood sugar freedom formula. So definitely go check out that chapter if you've got the book. If not, you can find it on Amazon, the blood sugar freedom formula. But pulling principles directly from the book, I had to adapt, right? So there was that, a number of other challenges I won't even go into before my race even started. But was able to actually schedule a meetup with some other cycling friends that I had who just wanted to go out for a short ride. So they joined me from miles 24 to 50. So for about 25 miles there, first 24 miles were on my own. And upon linking up with them, I was forced to adapt again. Let me get a sip of water here. Oh man. All right. So I'm by the way, this race was yesterday. I'm very tired. It's the middle of the day. I could fall asleep right now. I am exhausted. but that's what you'd expect, right, from a 100-mile race. That being said, had some friends that joined me in the bike ride, and right before, well, I joined them, and I take my glucose during the ride, and I consume an enormous amount of glucose during my bike rides, but it's on purpose, because if I'm riding my bike for 6+ hours, you need to have food, right? Your body only stores enough glucose for about 90 minutes of energy, so beyond 90 minutes, you got to start eating food left and right. So there's a whole strategy for how much insulin to take, because my insulin to carb ratio changes dramatically when I'm in the middle of exercise versus sitting in the kitchen, right? And it's important to know. We'll have to get that one in a different episode as well. But upon my friends joining me at mile 24, like a mile into the ride, right after I had 23 grams of carbohydrates through a glucose gel, one of them got a flat tire. Now, what happens when you have a flat tire? Everyone stops and waits for the guy to fix his flat tire so that you don't get separated, right? Well, the issue is that I've just had an enormous amount of carbs that are very fast acting, and not exercising means I'm going to have to take insulin for that food now, which throws off the entire calculation again, right? So adapting is just the name of the game yesterday, but you know what I mean. And it was good practice, we'll say that. Now, what's challenging with diabetes, and if you guys are still hanging with me to learn about this stuff, during exercise, you burn glucose, and if you are diabetic and you're making no adjustments to insulin, you're going to have to replenish that glucose at a pretty consistent rate, right? So I had been doing that, replenish, getting carbs in to balance out the carbs that have been burned, or technically the glucose that has been burned as energy, right? And having that big carb snack right before one of the guys got a flat tire meant that as soon as I stopped, I was no longer burning glucose, but I had just consumed glucose, which means, you guessed it, spike through the roof, right? And I'm watching my numbers go up. And then I hear one of the guys say, man, and I don't even know how to change a flat tire. And I was like, oh boy. So I told them, I was like, I gotta go. You guys are just for a short ride. I have 100 miles today. My blood sugars are going to be a nightmare if I don't get moving. And I was already at 196. I was like, well, there goes my perfect blood sugar day. I was on target, and I'm pretty upset about this, but need to adapt, right? So I told him I'm going to loop around for a bit to get my blood pumping again, get back into that burning glucose zone to hopefully balance out some of those carbs. Now, the challenge is, I got behind it. It was already spiking. It was too late, and it was going to go way out of range if I didn't take action. So I did have to take some insulin, which 2 hours into a bike ride is a very challenging thing to do, because your insulin sensitivity has changed dramatically by this point. So I took insulin at minute 1 to cover my carbs for the entire ride. 2 hours in, the insulin that I give goes dramatically further. So to give you a very generic example, if I take a unit at the beginning, that might cover 15 carbs, let's say. 2 hours in, that same unit, if I gave a unit 2 hours in, might cover 100 carbs. And then if I took insulin at 4, 5, 6 hours in, a single unit of insulin could cover 500 grams of carbs, which sounds insane, but that's kind of the way these things work. The longer you exercise, the more sensitive to insulin you get, and there gets to a point where you have overlapping issues, right? Because you have glucose burn rates as well as increased insulin sensitivity. So you have two things that are pushing blood sugars down. It can get really dangerous really fast if you don't know what you're doing, which is exactly why last week's episode I talked about there's a reason why some diabetics should not exercise, because they don't put the effort in to learn how to exercise properly and manage blood glucose during exercise. If you refuse to learn, you will learn by mistakes. And some of those mistakes can be costly and very dangerous. So, my personal opinion, if you're not going to take the time to learn how to do it safely, don't do it. It's a hot take, but I'd rather you stay out of the hospital. So, that being said, exercise, super good for you if you take the time to learn and build out some basic strategies. In fact, if you just read the book that I wrote, the Blood Sugar Freedom Formula, you'll have everything you need to get by. Guarantee it, right? You might not be like 100-mile race ready, but you'll get everything you need. That being said, all right, rant over. The flat caused an issue. I needed to adapt. I had to take some insulin, recalculate how deep am I in this insulin sensitivity hole, right? Is a quarter of a unit going to kill me? No? Okay, well, what's the exact amount I need to get my blood sugars back in range and push me back into a constant fueling volume where I can have X amount of carbs per hour? Did that, got it back in range, crashed. I'll be honest, I was kind of nervous because I had double arrows down for a second and I couldn't stop. As a group ride, so it's like, all right, you can't take the sugar in too early because if your double arrow's down at 170 and then it goes right back up, now it's even harder to correct because if you land at 250, how much insulin do you take now? Very difficult. So you have to thread the needle. We call it, I lost the phrase, but it's basically like you're trying to grab a falling knife. Like if you grab too soon, you grab the blade. If you grab too late, you miss it entirely. You have to grab perfectly as the blade is dropping to grab the handle so you're not hurt and you don't miss the opportunity, right? Because if you wait too long while your double arrow's down, urgent low, game over. If you don't wait long enough, you go right back to the high. So you have to time it perfectly. So waited until his double arrows down. And for me, double arrows down at 150, I took a glucose there and I leveled out at 101. Whew, that was a trust fall, if I've ever had one. It's like, trust the formula, Matt. You calculated this. You got it. And whew, 101 as we were entering the mountains. Now, mountains sounds crazy, right? Because it was supposed to be a coastal ride. It was supposed to stay on the ocean. But as we were heading up the coast, roads were closed. The entire course that I had planned the night before was now changed again. And by the way, this is the second course change. Earlier in the day, I had to close off the beginning part of my course because it was the first weekend with spring weather. Everybody and their mother was out at the beach and had to switch and pivot, right? So course had to change again. Instead of going up to the beaches, which was relatively flat, we had to go east out to the mountains, which is, you guessed it, very hilly. Hills are very difficult to cycle, especially if you were not planning for them in the middle of a 100-mile bike race. Hills, for me as well, burn glucose super fast. So heading into the hills with fresh insulin on board, mind you, because I had to give insulin because I was high because we stopped for a flat, right? Oh boy. I'm in for a rough one. Now, we can't change course because where else are we going to go? The road is closed. So we head east into the mountains, and I am crashing while we're going deeper into the mountains, further and further and further away from civilization. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is really good practice for my anxiety. This is excellent practice for facing my fears, because if you know anything about me, you know that I hate lows more than just about anything on planet Earth. Now, at this point, we're probably 30 to 40 miles in, I'm guessing. So I've still got a very long day ahead of me. At this point, I am reaching probably my fourth time of the day so far, wondering if I should just call it quits. Like, I've already done 100 miles before. I've done more than that in my Ironman. Who is this really for? It's not that important. I should just go home, right? Those mental demons come out to get you. There's a phrase that I love that we talk a lot about in our programs, actually. Starve the weakness, feed the warrior. You've got this weakness voice in the back of your head going, come on, you can quit. No one's going to care. You worked hard enough already. This is a challenging day. You've got excuses, right? And it tries to justify giving up. Starve that pesky voice in your head, the weakness. Feed the warrior, the one who says we can push through. We've done this before. Even if we haven't done this before, I know we can do this. We are strong. We are brave. We are warriors. Feed the warrior. Okay, if you got two voices in your head, you got to feed the right one. It will grow stronger. That being said, I chose to lean into it and said, you know what, we're going to just make this work. All right. So recalculated again with the formulas and overall ended up about doubling the total elevation gain that we thought we were going to have because of these hills. Got just over 4,000 feet of elevation gain. It was quite the task. And on the way through the mountains, you guessed it, another chance to practice adapting. Another guy in our group got a flat tire, stopped again. Oh my goodness, when is it going to end? This is just a great opportunity for me to overcome challenges, right? And I want you guys to hold on to that perspective as often as you can, because if you think about challenges being something you get to overcome, this is just practice, they're so much more manageable than being the end of the journey or like the thing that's trying to stop you. It's not trying to stop you, it's challenging you to grow. Growth is uncomfortable. Now, that being said, things after that went pretty smoothly. I was able to remain in control of my blood sugars. In fact, the 196 was the only out of range blood sugar I experienced across the entire day. Outside of that one experience, I hovered between 100 and 130 for the entirety of the ride beyond that. So spent, probably 80 or 90 miles in non-diabetic range. Very happy with that. However, the first third of the ride, couldn't really eat a whole lot because of that high, and I had to correct with insulin, wait for it to come back down. Like I said, you're grabbing the knife, it's the big trust fall, right? And because I was unable to eat enough in the beginning, but did take insulin for it, that insulin did catch up. Here's the second part of the lesson I want you guys to hold on to, is that you are burning glucose during activity, but as activities get longer, and this is not just ultra endurance sports, but also theme parks, right? You're walking a lot more than you usually do. Grocery runs, errands, chores, anytime you're gardening, mowing the lawn, right? The longer these activities go for, the more of an increase you'll see from insulin sensitivity. After my Ironman, which is a 13 plus hour race for me, it was 13 hours, 43 minutes that I was on the course for the Ironman. After that, my insulin needs were basically nothing. Okay. I didn't take insulin for my next meal or the one after that. And I stayed perfectly in like the 90s. It was insane. But that's an extreme example, obviously. But what I want you to pull from this is that by the time I got into the second half of my ride, the insulin that I had taken was really starting to pick up speed. I was burning glucose at a consistent rate, and I was seeing an increase. So insulin sensitivity increase was going up and up and up and up and up the longer I stayed out on the course, all right? A bunch of other factors at play as well. The heat comes into play, site location and all that. But the take-home point is that the second half of the ride, I had to consume enormous amounts of carbs to catch up because I had skipped a couple of my feedings in the first half. And that was super challenging because your body can only metabolize a certain amount of glucose per hour. You get above that, it just can't metabolize it. It can't digest it that fast. So when I'm getting into, 150 plus carbs per hour that I have to eat to just not go low, starts getting a little spooky, right? And that's to the point where I was, where actually quick math in my head, we do 25 times 5, 125, so that was my base. So yeah, about 150 carbs per hour. I did that for about 2 to 3 hours, and my stomach just could not take it. I had to shut my pump off. Again, pivot. You have to adapt to whatever life throws at you. So I've got different options for manipulating blood sugars. That one is, I believe, chapter 6 in my book. Correct me if I'm wrong, but just read the book. It's going to save you a lot of trouble. You get to a point, though, where with blood sugars, it's just like, what can I do to smooth this out? I'm sick of dealing with this, right? And I'm sure you've probably had these scenarios, maybe not in a long distance race like this, but you just got lows that are stuck, right? Highs that are stubborn. You're like, what do I have to do? I'll do anything. Just make it stop. I want to get out of these blood sugar zones because I'm sick of it. And that's kind of how I felt about the race. Towards the end, I was like, I'm so done. I'm trying to have fun, trying to enjoy this experience, but it is challenging. And thankfully, I never had any flat tires, never had any really big mechanical problems. I was fine, but it's just a long day. You're just going and going. And by the time I had been by myself for probably 3 or 4 hours. So yeah, you're just alone with your thoughts, no music, no nothing. And my wife surprised me by bringing my daughter and herself to my finish area. And the finish area, because the course got shortened and I had to adapt again, couldn't go further than I wanted to. I had to loop this little island in our area 5.5 times. So it's a 4-ish mile loop. I had to get my last 22 miles out around this thing and just loop, 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 which can drive you insane. And she brought our daughter there, and it was the cutest thing because every time I came around the corner, she was there, "Daddy, go, go, you got this." And my daughter is just amazing. She's the best cheerleader. And she's holding my Ironman bell and just clanking around, "Ding, ding, 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 go, Daddy!" And huge smile on my face. And so that's the third lesson for today, is that if you've got something you're trying to accomplish, whether it's an ultra endurance athletic event or just trying to keep your blood sugar stable day to day, just trying to get through dinner, really helps to have a good support system. This is why over the years we've actually structured all of our programs, because I work privately with type 1s as well, more so on like the lifestyle stuff, not ultra endurance athletics. Hardly anybody does this stuff. But like, people who are getting ready to retire or trying to take care of their family and just trying to enjoy life, I work with them. And one of the things that we now structured into our programs is a community. We all hang out in chats, in video calls, in learning lessons, right? We do master classes. We invite expert speakers in to come talk to our clients and teach them outside principles. We do it together, because when you have someone to lean on, you go so much further. Mile 78, giving up isn't in my vocabulary, but I felt it. I was so tired. I was so done. I was like, I'm just here. I'm going to continue suffering until it's over. I'm just going to suffer through, right? And I can suffer through just about anything. That's where my head's at. I'm like, I can do it. I don't care if it's uncomfortable. I'm going to get it done, but I'm not going to enjoy this. But then turning the corner and seeing those that I love cheering me on, oh my goodness. I was invigorated. I was like, I could do this all day. Yeah. Every 4 miles, I get greeted by my wife and daughter who are cheering me on. My goodness. And then turns out my wife had also texted my mom, who lives pretty close to that area. And on the last 2 laps, my mom was there too. And so it's a wonderful thing when you're surrounded by people that you care about, whether they are family or friends or fellow warriors, right? Fellow renegades. Surrounding yourself with the right people will take you so much further than you will ever go by yourself. I promise you that. So from today, learn how to spot the moments where you need to pivot, right? With your medical team, if they're not serving you well, if they don't meet your standards, just like the race director's course safety did not meet my standards, it might be time to pivot. Okay, second lesson, as challenges come up, our superpower is being able to adapt. You have to be able to adapt. If you get stopped by the first challenge, you're never going to grow. You're never going to experience the level of greatness that you were created for. Okay? And then level 3 or lesson 3 is support. You got to get around the right people. If you don't know other type 1s who are hungry for this kind of growth, progress, precision, you got to jump in with us. In fact, we actually have an open community for everyone who has purchased the book. So if you have the book and you don't know about this yet, there's a QR code inside your book. You need to scan that with your phone. If you can't figure out the phone thing, send my team an email. All right. You can always email support@ftfwarrior.com. Let them know, hey, I bought the book. I can't figure out how to get into the open community. We have that there so people can support each other. And I hop in there too. I actually posted in there yesterday. We have materials for you, resources, community, people, things to help you succeed. In fact, last month, we did a whole read-along event where I went through all the principles in the book live. We did Q&A. I went deeper on a lot of the topics, introduced a few new formulas and examples that only they have access to. And the cool thing is we recorded all of it and archived it in that open community and said, hey, anybody who's ever bought the book, you now have the replays. They're yours. We just include stuff like that for free. So my goal for you is to overcome the challenges, the doubts, the fears, overcome, to rise. You got this. Now, I know it's challenging, okay? And trust me, there are times when, like in my race, so is it with diabetes, I want to give up sometimes. I'm like, man, that was a rough day. Did not like it. 0 out of 10. Would not do again. Okay? But we rise. And when you have people surrounding you that support you and that get it, especially if they're type 1s, so much easier. And lastly, what I want to share is that it's kind of about your attitude as well. Your attitude to deal with whatever life throws your way. Right? There's a common phrase, when life throws you lemons, you make lemonade. Right? It's like, well, what if there's no blender and you can't make the lemon? You got to do it by hand, right? Will you still put the work in to make it work? So it's the attitude that allows us to overcome whatever life throws our way. And with diabetes, it's all about managing the variables, right? So we've got 50 plus variables that are impacting our blood sugars: exercise, diet, lifestyle, sleep, stress, hydration, temperature, barometric pressure. I'm not kidding. Like, that's actually stuff that works towards your blood sugar going up or down. But what you do with that is what determines your outcomes. If you have an attitude of can do, where, yeah, I can do that, I will, right? It's going to take you a lot further. But surrounding yourself with people who believe that as well, it's going to help set you up for success. In our communities, we operate under a phrase called CANI. C-A-N-I stands for constant and never-ending improvement. We're never done. Progress is a constant, okay? You don't have to be making massive progress, but one step in front of the other will take you so much further than one binge week of making massive progress and then giving up because you burnt out, right? So I share all of that because I want you to get in that community. If you've got the book, if you don't have the book yet, that's your first step, obviously, but you got to surround yourself with the right people to strengthen that muscle, the muscle of embracing challenges. You can do this. I believe in you, even if you don't. And I've been there. That's why I say that. I used to not believe in myself. I used to think blood sugars were too hard. They were completely unpredictable and they could not be controlled. Here we are where, and I'll put it on screen now if you're watching, these are my blood sugars through most of that ride, except for that one time when the guy got a flat tire. Your blood sugars can be controlled. They can be predictable, and they can be so stable that you're able to do whatever you want. Eat the right foods, eat the fun foods. Either way, totally fine. Work out for 30 minutes, go for a century ride and ride 100 miles in a day. Either way, totally fine. The key here is that you craft the right blood sugar formula for your needs. We're all different, so we all have slightly different variations of these blood sugar formulas. That's why I write a book about it, so you can go in and identify what your formula looks like so that you too can have freedom with your type 1 diabetes. So here we are. That's the race report. Made it through. At the end of the race, the guys that I was racing or riding with was like, dude, you already paid for the medal and you actually rode more than they did. Technically, the race course, this is what also kind of frustrated me. The race course for a 100-mile race was only 95.3 miles. I'm like, that's not a century. That's 95.3. Add more miles. So I did more than they did. He was like, just go get your medal. So I rode down and rode through the finish line, grabbed it, and there it is. So the medal for the race that never happened. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this one. And I sure enjoyed the ride, even with its challenges, because that's what life's all about. It's overcoming challenges and growing consistently. So we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for hanging out and keep up the fight.